They did not just hide the missiles. They buried them deep inside a mountain. The tunnels they dug were reinforced with concrete walls. They dared the world to come find them. And for a long time, they weren't. The mountain became a vault. And inside that vault sat one of the largest stockpiles of ballistic missiles on Earth. It sat there quietly, untouched, just waiting. But then America decided enough was enough. And what happened next changed what we thought we knew about modern warfare, about deterrence, and about what security really means in the 21st century. You're watching John A.G. Reports. This sounds like something pulled straight out of a movie script, except it is completely real, and it is unfolding right now. The consequences will spread outward and touch every one of us, no matter where we live on this planet. Oil prices, shipping lanes, alliances, and the credibility of American power. All of it is tied to what just happened inside those mountains. So stay with us, because this story only gets more intense as we dig into it. If you are new to the channel, before we begin, go ahead and hit the subscribe button and give this video a like. We bring you the real stories, the ones that truly matter, with no fluff and no spin. Just the facts laid out clearly so you can form your own opinion. And trust me, you do not want to miss what happens after this, because it directly affects how global politics will unfold over the next few months. Let's go back to the beginning. Because to really understand why the United States took such a dramatic and historic step, you need to know exactly what Iran was building inside these mountains, how long they spent building it, and why it kept military planners in Washington, Tel Aviv, and allied capitals around the world awakened. This is not a story that started last year. It started decades ago, and it has been quietly moving toward this moment ever since. Iran's missile program was not built overnight. It was built over decades, piece by piece, carefully and quietly assembled, sometimes with help from countries that had their own reasons for wanting American influence kept in check. Over the years, Iran built one of the most extensive ballistic missile arsenals anywhere in the Middle East. Short-range systems designed for regional targets, medium-range systems capable of reaching deep into neighboring countries, and eventually missiles capable of reaching targets more than 1,000 miles away. But what worried American generals the most was not the missiles themselves, and it was not even the number of them. It was where Iran chose to put them. Iran's planners watched modern warfare very closely. They saw coalition air power destroy Saddam Hussein's exposed military hardware during the Gulf War. Tanks and artillery sitting in the open desert were destroyed from the air before they could even fire. They watched precision-guided munitions flatten command centers and supply depots in a matter of hours, sometimes in just minutes. And Iran's military planners drew a clear and logical lesson from all of it. If you want your military capability to survive contact with the United States Air Force, you cannot fight in the open, and you cannot store your weapons in the open. You go underground, and you go as deep as engineering will allow. That is exactly what they did. Years before most of the world was paying attention, Iran began building what military analysts now call a network of underground missile cities. These were not simple bunkers dug a few meters into a hillside. These were massive and fully operational military complexes carved directly into solid mountain rock, in some cases, hundreds of meters below the surface. These facilities reportedly stored ballistic missiles ready for launch, transporter erector launchers, hill storage, command and control centers, workshops, and enough food, water, and supplies to keep crews operating for long periods of time, even if everything above them had been reduced to rubble. Over the years, satellite imagery began detecting unusual patterns of activity around several mountain ranges in western and central Iran. Analysts discovered tunnel entrances carefully disguised to look like natural rock formations, ventilation shafts hidden among boulders, and access roads that appeared to lead directly into the sides of mountains and nowhere else. Iran's methods of concealment were methodical and patient. Most construction happened under cover of darkness. Excavated material was spread across wide areas so analysts could not estimate how much rock had been removed. And surface-to-air missile batteries were placed around the terrain specifically to discourage reconnaissance aircraft from getting close enough for a better look. By the time Western intelligence agencies finally put together a fairly clear picture of what had been built, the scale was genuinely shocking. Some estimates suggested Iran had built enough underground capacity to shelter thousands of ballistic missiles and their associated launch equipment, protected from nearly every conventional airstrike that existed at the time. The mountain itself had become the shield. Hundreds of meters of rock stood between American bombs and the missiles below. Inside the Pentagon there was a quiet but unsettling realization. Even the most powerful bunker-busting bombs in the American arsenal at that point were simply not designed to punch through that much solid rock. For years, the heaviest conventional bomb actively used by the United States was the GBU-58 bunker buster. And it was a serious weapon, capable of chewing through several meters of reinforced concrete before exploding. But several meters of concrete is one thing. Hundreds of meters of mountain rock is something entirely different. Against the deep buried facilities Iran spent years constructing, the GBU-28 simply was not enough. Military planners knew this gap existed long before it became a public issue. So quietly, far away from press releases and headlines, work began on an entirely different class of weapon. The result was the massive ordnance penetrator, officially designated the GBU-57. This weapon sits in a category of its own. It weighs more than 30,000 pounds. It is nearly 20 feet long. It carries an enormous explosive payload inside its casing, and it was specifically designed to survive violent impacts deep into rock before the payload detonates. When details of this weapon first became public, military analysts described it as something without a real precedent in the history of conventional warfare. A bomb built for one purpose and one purpose only: to reach places nothing else could reach. Even after the GBU-57 entered the arsenal, planners still worried that it might not be enough against Iran's deepest facilities, the ones buried farthest inside the mountains. So a classified upgrade program quietly began, improved guidance systems for even greater precision, an enhanced penetrator design intended to survive more violent impacts, and more advanced targeting technology developed and tested at remote facilities far from public view. The goal was simple: build something capable of reaching whatever Iran had buried, no matter how deep the mountain was, and make sure it worked reliably the first time. While all of this engineering work was taking place, the geopolitical pressure cooker kept building in the background. Iran was not simply sitting on its missile arsenal as a passive deterrent for some hypothetical future war. It actively armed and supplied proxy forces throughout the region. It supported groups that openly threatened American allies. And in several documented cases, those proxy forces carried out drone and missile attacks directly targeting American military bases. Every new attack, every new American casualty or near miss, increased the political pressure in Washington to respond. Not with another round of sanctions, not with statements of condemnation, and not with quiet diplomatic protest. Inside secure briefing rooms, the debate over how to respond was intense and lasted for a very long time. Some of the options presented to senior leaders involved limited and mostly symbolic strikes designed to send a message without fundamentally changing the strategic picture. Other options were historic in scope and carried a real risk of triggering a wider conflict. Everyone in that room understood something. Striking Iran's underground missile facilities would not be just another military decision based solely on operational considerations. It would send shock waves through global energy markets, regional alliances, and the broader credibility of American military power. Meanwhile, on the Iranian side, there was no sign of backing down. In fact, quite the opposite. Iranian officials publicly challenged the United States to try to destroy their underground network. The Iranian commanders gave interviews boasting about how invincible these mountain fortresses were. They insisted America could bomb the mountains all day long and it would not change what was happening underground. History shows that this kind of public bravado often backfires in a very specific and predictable way. When an opponent repeatedly declares on camera that your most advanced weapons cannot reach them, the reaction inside the Pentagon is not to dismiss the claim. It is to quietly make absolutely certain that something can reach them, and to be ready to prove it. According to every available account, that is exactly what happened next. The upgraded GBU-57, now equipped with enhanced guidance systems, greater penetration capability, and sharper targeting technology, was declared operationally ready. The only aircraft in the world capable of carrying a weapon of that size into heavily defended airspace while remaining undetected was the B-2 Spirit, one of the most advanced stealth bombers ever built. Its flying wing design has remained at the forefront of stealth technology for decades. Pair the B-2 with the upgraded massive ordnance penetrator and you get a strike capability that simply did not exist anywhere else on Earth. When the strike was finally authorized and carried out, the details that later emerged were really extraordinary. B-2 bombers launched from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri, aircraft capable of reaching almost any target on Earth without landing, cruising at high altitude for hours while remaining effectively invisible to enemy radar systems. Each plane could carry multiple GBU-57 weapons. Hitting deep buried hardened targets with this level of precision required perfect timing, flawless navigation over thousands of miles, and complete confidence built on years of testing that the weapons would function exactly as designed. For the first time in combat, they did. The physics behind how the GBU-57 actually works is fascinating once you break it down. After release from high altitude, the bomb accelerates to supersonic speed as it falls almost straight toward its target. Its hardened steel casing is specifically designed to maximize penetration while protecting the explosives inside from the impact. It punches through layer after layer of soil and solid rock before a delayed fuse triggers the explosion at a precisely calculated depth. When multiple bombs strike the exact same point, each successive weapon travels farther down the channel carved by the one before it. This allows combined penetration to depths that no single weapon could ever achieve on its own. Post-strike assessments pieced together from satellite imagery, signal intelligence, and other collection methods reportedly painted a picture of destruction that Iran's planners had publicly declared impossible. Military analysts reviewing the available imagery and intelligence described the results as a genuine game changer. A moment that fundamentally changed what is now considered possible when conventional weapons are used against deeply buried hardened targets anywhere in the world. But much of the mainstream coverage misses something important. The enormous physical destruction is only half the story. The psychological and strategic consequences may matter even more in the long run. Iran's entire underground missile network was built around one central strategic assumption. The American military power had a hard physical limit, and going deep underground placed their most valuable assets permanently beyond that limit. That assumption gave Iranian leaders tremendous confidence and a great deal of freedom to act aggressively throughout the region, because they believed their core capabilities simply could not be touched. The moment that assumption was proved unwrong in real time, and with real footage, everything changed. Facilities that Iran spent years and enormous resources building because they represented security suddenly became something very different. Fixed, geographically mapped, and now demonstrably target-able liabilities. Without realizing it, Iran concentrated enormous amounts of its most valuable military assets in a relatively small number of locations that the entire world now knows can be reached and destroyed. The strategic calculation did not just shift slightly. It completely flipped almost overnight, and in a way that will be difficult to reverse. The ripple effect spread quickly and far beyond Iran's borders. Allies and proxy groups across the region that had partly based their own sense of security on Iranian missile power began quietly asking how much those old guarantees were really worth. Other countries in the region started recalculating their own strategic positions, because the balance of power had clearly changed, not simply because the infrastructure had been damaged, but because something had just been publicly demonstrated for the first time. The Middle East never exists in a vacuum. These changes ripple through global oil markets, international shipping lanes, long-standing alliances, and the broader credibility of American military power on the world stage. Naturally, opinions remained deeply divided over whether these strikes were the right decision. Critics warn that military action on this scale risks dangerous escalation. It strengthens hardliners inside Iran and makes future diplomatic solutions more difficult. They argue that the long-term answer to Iran's missile program must come through sustained negotiations and international pressure, not bombs, no matter how powerful and precise those bombs may be. Supporters of the strikes counter that years of patient diplomacy produced very little real change in Iranian behavior. The underground facilities represented a growing indirect threat to American forces and regional allies, and allowing Iran to believe it had found a truly untouchable sanctuary was its